Good evening and welcome to YBC Revolt Talk on Men's Health. Your body, your health, take charge. We invite you all to please be sure to like, follow, and share all of our social media outlets on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and subscribe to our YouTube channel at YBC Revolt. Tonight's show is sponsored by PGD Innovations. Their mission is to inspire, connect, and educate today's youth to empower our communities. My name is Harold Booker, and I'm joined by YBC member Mishan Cicero and our very special guest. Hello. Welcome, Mishan. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
Pretty good. But before we get to the show, I want to ask the people who are watching a Black Health trivia question. The winner of this question will win a PGD Innovations Legend shirt of their choice. What is the most common cancer death found amongst Black men? So we're just going to throw that out there. If you think you know the answer, tweet us, comment, shoot us an email, let us know. All right. And next, I want to introduce our guests. Tonight, we have joining us special guest, Dr. Iroku. Did I get that right?
That's like Grandma used to say it.
All right. I think you're making me feel good, but I'll take it. So
yes,
Dr. Ugu,
I am.
Dr. Ugu is an NYC-based physician and public health expert. He's board-certified gastroenterologist in New York City's premier specialty group. He's also assistant professor at Mount Sinai Hospital. In that capacity, he serves during the coronavirus pandemic on the front lines, covering emergency room patients and performing urgent and emergent life-saving procedures as needed. Dr. Ugu has a long-standing passion for combating medical misinformation and for raising public health literacy by demystifying scientific and medical issues through accessibility, educational approaches, and programs for community organizations. He can be found on NBC, Fox, Cosmopolitan, Reader's Digest, Insiders, Living Strong, Yahoo Life, SiriusXM, and other outlets. He is a learned man. This man has gone to school at Harvard Medical School, Cornell, Columbia, Johns Hopkins School of Public Health, Northwestern University, Kellogg School of Management. Did I leave out any of the Ivies?
I think that covers all the student loan debt. I think you got it all.
So please help me in welcoming Dr. Ugu to the show. So good to see you.
Hello, YBT Nation.
So let's start off with one of the questions that's not on the list. I told you I like to kind of go informal. And I kind of warned you on this question before we kind of got in. What is a gastroenterologist? What exactly is that the study of? What do you do?
That's right. So hello, everybody. Gastroenterologist, I'll just start by breaking down that word, and then I'll kind of explain what it is. So gastro is just the word for stomach. So if you ever hear that term gastro, you know it's referring to your stomach, gastronomy. And then enterology, entero refers to your intestines. And then ologist just means someone who spent a lot of time thinking about those things. So that's the breakdown. I'm someone who thinks about the digestive tract, how it affects you, interacts with your food, keeps you healthy, how it can start veering off and try to make you sick, and how it can bring it back on board to get you feeling well when it's acting up.
Okay. And I guess as a follow-up question, what type of symptoms would someone experience to need to stop by your office and see you?
Yeah, so we're that classic Thanksgiving evening feeling. That's a point where probably everyone in America is feeling, gastroenterology symptoms. So it can range from nausea, poor appetite, feeling bloated, pain, some people constipation, some people diarrhea, some people blood in their stool or other things in their stool. And so, most of us just feel it after a night where we know we deserve to feel it. But there's some people who feel those symptoms at any point and they're trying to figure out why. So they come to us and we help them think through it and figure out what's going on.
So if someone was feeling that kind of feeling for maybe a few days, you would probably recommend them going to check that out immediately, right?
That's right. And now there's some symptoms that are so vague, little indigestion, a little, nausea or belching. it's definitely reasonable to get some Pepto-Bismol or some Maalox, or watch your diet, kind of clean things up. Then there's some symptoms that are so severe, no one's going to have to tell you. You'll come to see us. So severe pain like appendicitis, that falls under us too. Okay. Or what we call diverticulitis. Some of you who spend time with grandma and grandpa.
What does that mean? Sorry.
Yeah, so appendicitis is appendix. That's just this dangling organ that's on the lower right side of your belly. Those of you who've had this know exactly where it was when it got inflamed. Itis just means it's inflamed. So appendicitis means your appendix got inflamed. Diverticulitis means that your diverticulosis got inflamed. And the diverticulosis is just a way of saying dimples in the colon. And some people, especially if you haven't had a lot of fiber in your diet, if you're straining a lot, you can have these little dimples that form through your colon. And when they get inflamed and irritated, instead of it being on the right side towards the bottom, it's usually on the left side to the bottom. A lot of pain down there. And sometimes you might need antibiotics to get that under control. So just a few of many things. Pancreatitis, that's when your pancreas is inflamed. Gastritis, just your stomach is inflamed. There's a lot of itis in there. And we try to help out with all of them.
This is all very fascinating to me as I studied accounting and political science in college. So it's like a whole new world, a whole new language that you're speaking. So I'm really fascinated by all of this. Hopefully the viewers are following along with us.
So you can handle the whole thing with Nevada and Pennsylvania. The way that stumps me is the way the gut is stumping you. I get it.
I was trying to avoid that one because I thought I was going to need to come visit you after Tuesday night. My stomach, I was like, let me just lay down. So I guess to get back on the track of some of our pre-written questions, what would you say is the most common thing men neglect about their health, right? So I love your specialty, and I could probably pick your brain all day about like different procedures and stuff you do in your office, but we're here to talk about men's health. So what are some of the things that men typically neglect about their health?
I was thinking about that, and I had to give the honest answer. If I had to think of one single thing that men tend to disregard the most, it's got to be mental health. It's the most under-discussed, over-involved aspect of our health. It's something that, there's taboos ingrained in the way we think about it in the community. It's a family history that no one really wants to talk about in the family, or definitely not even outside the family, but it doesn't take away from the fact that it's real, it's there. When we see it then on TV, on the screens, we tend to ridicule it. We don't even need to give too many names of, some stars in our community where, there might be a diagnosis, and then along with that, some ridicule about, some of the way they're behaving. And so, I know you guys have me on your show, but I'm going to ask you guys a question. If you had to guess, what fraction of people do you think have mental health issues? Is it like 1 in 100, 1 in 1,000? What range?
I'm going to say 1 in 4.
You see, these are some learned gentlemen. These are some men who know what they're talking about. Exactly. It's that common. So 1 in 5, and at any period of time. But if it's lifetime, like even anxiety and everything, it's like 50%. At some point, 50% of us are going to have some mental illness, that we're dealing with. And even if it doesn't get to the point of calling it that, we all go through adversity, tough trials, whether it's family members dying, people being laid off, a pandemic, a leader you may not like. We all go through series of adversities, and your mindset in terms of being able to handle things that are happening to you and to be productive is probably the most important thing you need to survive, not just a case of cancer, but just life, living on this earth as a Black man, as a woman, your perspective. And so I would have to say mental health, so underappreciated, so important in terms of its effect on the way we live and thrive in this world.
So I have a question about that though. So I got my number. I went to some random seminar, and they were saying that like most U.S. adults, like 50% of U.S. adults have some type of diagnosable mental illness. I'm personally not against therapy. I do sometimes have questions about going to certain therapists because I'm a little afraid of what they're going to write in their little black book, but more importantly, my manila folder. You know, I told you I majored in political science. I think one day I'll be before a Senate hearing, you know, for ambassador of some small country one day. And I just wonder about, you know, if some of the things that I'm sharing in confidence, if, you know, that could become public for either security clearances or, you know, any type of public life.
Well, the counter argument to that is just look at the evidence. You know, we have probably the most high profile person, you know, the president of the United States of America, and you tell me what's in his medical file. You know, with hacking and 2020 and all the availabilities to do X, Y, or Z, we have no information other than the fact that, you know, he had COVID and had a heel spur around the time of war. So like there are laws that protect the confidentiality between the patient and provider, and those usually are not transgressed. And then just historically, you can think president by president or senator by senator, you really can't think of too many situations where that trust has been violated, and for good reason.
Yeah, I think most of that is covered underneath HIPAA, right? The client privilege of keeping information confidential.
That's correct. Again, a learned man. Yeah, it's a Health Information Protection Act. I'm not giving the exact acronym, but essentially it says just that it is illegal to share that information, and again, historically, it's just really not something that has been an issue. I definitely would never let that theoretical risk keep a person in between them and accessing necessary care. In fact, I was just having a conversation with a group of colleagues, and as a group, you know, we all said, you know, we all commended the impact as a whole that therapy seems to have on people's lives. For people who had tried it, they said, I never thought it would be as useful, but these guys are very insightful and were able to bring out a lot of aspects of the defense mechanisms or, you know, habits or perspectives in a way that they never thought existed within themselves. And so I would say never let a thing like that keep you from getting needed care. It's important. It's very destigmatized. There's a move to destigmatize it, and it should be destigmatized. It's important, and I would stay away from it if that's something a person needed.
I think that's a great point. But what about I guess the physical body, like just getting men to the doctor? So I'm not to put my dad's business all out there, but we don't have a HIPAA signature, but I struggle to get this man to go to the doctor, right? Insurance is not an issue. Location of the doctor is an issue. He just simply does not go to the doctor unless he feels like he's knocking on death's door. What can we do to encourage like more men to go get that physical annual checkup or seek you know, physician assistance?
Yeah, you know, that's a great question. I've come to the point where, because I think I probably started off thinking about it the way you're thinking about it, you know, with frustration. Hey, why don't you do X, Y, or Z? But I've come to the point, either professionally or just in life, where I just realized that hesitance is part of the disease, almost like, you know, there is a sense that when a person comes in contact with the fact that they're mortal, you know, especially Black men, there's this, you know, aspect of toxic masculinity that sometimes exists where people feel like they have to be Superman for their communities, for their people. And just to admit by scheduling an appointment with, you know, your primary care doctor, your psychiatrist, you know, X, Y, or Z, it's just a little admission that you're not as immortal as you want to be. And so this is where support comes in. As a community, we need to do just like what you guys are doing, normalize conversations around health. This conversations save lives. And then also, I think just as someone within the, you know, around the kitchen table, we have to keep them, you know, I see all the time where the mothers, the wives, the daughters are the people scheduling the office appointments. I say, what brings you here? He was like, my wife, you know, and it's like, or daughter. He's just like, my daughter just dragged me here and the daughter planned it all out. So we need to do that sometimes. Sometimes you just need to kind of like understand this is just reality. It's not just your dad. It's all the dads and moms sometimes, but sometimes we just need to step in and move them along towards taking care of their health the way they did for us. You know, when we were pediatric patients, there is that role that support members have to play within the family, for sure.
Awesome. Yeah. And I think that's a good segue to my next question. Taking preventive measures is always a good thing, but at what rate, like what age range should we begin that process, right? What should we begin testing for? Should we start testing for like prostate, thyroid, colon cancer, anything of that nature? How early and how soon?
Yeah, so I think oftentimes when people think about screening and testing and preventative things, sometimes their mind just goes to, you know, colonoscopies, and we might have heard age 50, and that's all we have in mind. So a couple of things. Number one is even that age 50 isn't age 50 anymore. So if you have a history of polyps in your family or colon cancer in your family, you might have to have your test done earlier than age 50. So for Black people in particular, we're considered a high risk group because we not only get colon cancer more than any other ethnic group, but we also are more likely to die from it. And so as a group, we've already been given the dispensation of doing our screening at age 45. And there's actually moves to nationally bring everyone down to 45. So that's something important to know. And it might be younger if you have it in your family, so talk to your doctor about that.
So it does run in my family. So what would be the age for someone like me who
yeah, so the formal way I think of it is that it's 10 years earlier than the index person had their polyp, or age 45, whichever comes first. So to say that in English, essentially either age 45 if you're Black, or if your dad, let's say, had a polyp at age, let's say, 48, then you should have your colonoscopy at age 38. If he had his polyp at age 35, then you should have your colonoscopy at age 25. Do people have colonoscopies in their 20s? You bet your rectum they do. Yeah, all the time. And, you know, we've seen examples with, you know, the popular case of Chadwick Boseman, who was an absolute hero, had his diagnosis, took it, you know, brought us iconic roles. But, you know, one of the things he's doing, even in his passing, is passing on to communities all over the world, especially Black communities, the importance of paying attention to symptoms in your body. And because he was young when he had his colorectal cancer, so we can't always just say, okay, well, I will have my colonoscopy at age X, Y, or Z. Sometimes if you're having symptoms, that needs to be on your radar and you need to have it sooner. So yes, I've done colonoscopies in patients in their 20s, 30s, 40s, et cetera. And it's important to do it. And we remove polyps and et cetera, and so that they don't get the chance to develop colon cancer. And I'd like to say also that even when we do find colon cancer, because some people say, well, I don't want to go and get bad news. Don't do that, although it's a very common reason people just don't want to hear bad news. But if you come in, if we do or you're testing, we find it early, you have like a 95% survival rate at 5 years. Whereas if you kind of leave it alone and just never address it, that 95 drops all the way down to 11%, you know, survival rate at 5 years. So it's important to just, if you know you have these symptoms, you're just not shaking them, maybe it's gone a week or 2 or 3 or 4, you know, whether it's short time, whether it's a long time, you feel like you've waited too long, either way, just make the decision, make an appointment, come see your doctor and help let us think through it with you. You don't have to play patient and doctor at the same time.
That's good news. I didn't know that about like the 10 years less the age that someone else. So let's say you do go get it 10 years prior to like your last family member. How often should you go back and get like follow-up colonoscopies?
Yeah, it all depends on exactly what's going on, but in general terms, and there's a lot of, you know, kind of like ways we think through these things, but in general terms, it's probably going to be on the order of around 5 years in very general terms. Yeah.
All right, I'm learning something new. So I guess with that, you talked about like people having colonoscopies at 20 and 30, which is kind of chilling to me. um,
And I didn't make any friends with that statement right there.
at all. What age should young men who are maturing transition from like a pediatric doctor to, I guess, a regular doctor? I guess what we call that, general physician or internal medical doctor.
Yeah. Whether you want to call it internal medical doctor, whether you want to call it family practitioner, there's a lot of good names to use. But yeah, I think in general, once you become an adult, it's probably time to switch over to an adult doctor. And so pretty much, the pediatricians will give people multiple years of grace, depending on the situation. But you don't want to be the old man, sitting beside like the 2-year-old in your pediatrician's office. So pretty much once you hit like, 18, you should consider it as a rite of transition. You want to go and find yourself a great adult doctor and make that connection, so that you have a new connection for the next years to come.
So 18 is like a safe age.
Yeah, that's what I would say. And again, there are people in their young 20s who do still go to their pediatrician, but that's probably because they have a rock star pediatrician who's amazing, who probably knows the family. But they're probably, going to begin to gently push you out towards adult doctors following that.
And should I be looking for a doctor that looks like me, or generally speaking, who look for me?
Yeah, that's a big question now. I think there's something about 2020. I've never had that question come up more than this year, where people are specifically coming in looking for doctors who look like them. It's interesting. I'll tell you on our side, there's, our side being academic research, there's research that shows that African-American physicians tend to take care of African-American populations and be willing to serve in underserved populations. And there's also research that shows that, for example, Black men will tend to be willing to do more tests, even invasive tests, if it's brought to them by someone of the same race. And this, again, is more speaking to the issue that we haven't said by name, but, one word is racism or institutionalized racism, or, there are a lot of stories when people have been in some situations and they're already feeling sick, and they're now trying to make this determination: is this doctor telling me something that's really important for me, or is this just more racism, which is a very hard calculus to be making, again, when you're not feeling at your best. It's a shame that we should be in that position. Oftentimes, you can't blame the victim. There are many instances of, a transgression on the physician-patient, kind of relationships. And it's not just back in Tuskegee. There are things that exist right till today.
Right.
Where, there's just been racism, just to be honest, in different platforms. So a lot of people are. Now, obviously, there are amazing, amazing, amazing doctors that come of all races, but there definitely has been, I think, this year, a renewed interest in people just kind of reconnecting with physicians who also look like them and kind of speak the same language, so they can just get to the medical issue without having to decipher, any other things going on at the same time.
So I'm definitely guilty of being one of those people, and I have been since I've become an adult. There was an experience in college where a lot of my friends were going across town to, I'm not going to call the university's name, but it was in Atlanta, predominantly white institution with a great hospital network, and were being misdiagnosed. And it was a local kind of like campus doctor who was like, "You guys are going across the tracks and getting the wrong information. We could have just stayed here." So from that point on, I definitely am the person who's locked off looking at for Howard or Meharry or looking at the pictures. See if I can find someone of similar ancestry.
And it's a shame it shouldn't come to that. And luckily, bad apples tend to be few and far between, but it only takes so many experiences, to kind of really, make people really turned off. And so I think what I would say is that in any context, representation matters. Whether it's in government, whether it's on radio and podcasts, and definitely in the healthcare field too. We need to be there. We need to be part of the conversation, driving thinking, driving content. The world's going to be better because of diversity, especially in leadership in all of our fields.
Yeah, and that idea of looking for a doctor that looks like me really made sense from a negative experience. Actually, right? I was in college, and there was this girl that I had met that she was studying, and she was like, I'm studying to be a dermatologist, and she was like, because we're underrepresented in that field, right? I was like, that makes sense, right? Someone of my skin color would know better about my skin than someone who is, of another skin type, right? So it was just something that kind of was stuck in the back of my mind at a very early age as something I should consider when looking for physicians.
That's right. And I think it's especially, sometimes there is I'm going to get myself in trouble. Sometimes there is that kind of fear of like, how early BET, I'll call it early BET, like there'll be those early BET experiences and you're like only on BET, but we need to support each other. We need to support all aspects of Black businesses, whether it's in entertainment, restaurants, and definitely in health as well. And really break the stereotype. There's Black excellence. There is definitely, I could tell you, some amazing Black female physicians, amazing Black male physicians of all ages who are just prove themselves day in, day out. And so sometimes, again, the stereotype is not only on the outside, it's on the inside too. And people wonder, well, that guy looks more like a doctor, pointing to an older white physician as opposed to a younger Black physician. And the younger Black physician might be stellar, and you might just miss out on that. So we also need to make sure we're not just labeling ourselves and missing out on some excellence too.
That's true.
Yeah, that's fair. I'm also guilty of that one. Anytime I see a really young nurse coming, I'm like, I have rolling veins. They pop up. Like, go get the older one. I'm in there giving whole interviews to the phlebotomist about like how many people have you stuck today? How many times did you have to stick them twice?
I know. You are always going to be your best advocate. I would never drop that, no matter what situation it is. I think what it is, the difference between like everyone needs to prove themselves, as long as it's fair, but it shouldn't just be on the issue of race. And so we shouldn't just assume it's going to be a less inferior doctor just because they're Black. And so, but no, you always have to make sure you keep everyone in check. So never lose that for yourself or your families. That's probably a key thing to hold on to in the hospital and dealing with any system. You want to make sure that you're keeping, whether it's your teachers of your kids or your own teachers, professors, you just want to make sure you're looking out for yourself and advocating for yourself. We need to not lose that voice no matter what the context is, for sure.
Doctor, you have just encouraged me in all of the wrong ways. I appreciate it. I'll keep giving them hell.
Got to.
So I want to pivot. So this is something I didn't really know about. So apparently every woman and man at one point or another gets a yeast infection. And they're saying it's no secret, but it's a secret to me. I didn't know it was a thing for men. What exactly is a yeast infection and what can we do to treat it?
So I'll start by saying that I just want to address that. Yeah, I think it's a lot more common in women than in men. I'll start by saying that. But what is a yeast infection? Just like it sounds like it, yeast is what it is. And sometimes we can have an infection in our body. We're used to maybe concepts like jock itch or like, some people get it on their hair. But sometimes—
Wait, is like ringworm or jock itch a form of a yeast infection?
Yeah, jock itch can be. That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah. It's a different type, but it also kind of falls under that general range. But the specific, when we usually use the phrase yeast infection, we're usually talking about what's typically Candida albicans. and the one that women more likely get. So this is something that women more typically get. And, a male might be saying, well, I understand that a woman could have a yeast infection, in their vagina, to use that word. I'm not sure what the PG rating is here, but,
let's just go for it, Doc.
but where could that happen for a male? And the answer is it can at the tip of the penis. It's more common. I think the two groups of males that's most common in are uncircumcised males or little kids, before they're kind of completely in charge of what's going on down there. So for uncircumcised male, I think the risk is on the order of 1 in 30. So it's still not everybody getting it. And I think if it were that common, we'd have a sense of it. But it definitely is. That's not a small number, 1 in 30. And I think it's a little higher, maybe like 1 in 25 for kids under 4 years old getting it. And then there are also some medical conditions that might make you more likely to get a yeast infection. Like if you have the typical things, diabetes, and if you're a smoker, and
anything that might lower your immune system. Sounds like.
Yeah, that's right. Anything lowering your immune system, poor hygiene. These are things that are can affect you. And again, uncircumcised males, even if you're not circumcised, if you follow the proper hygiene, it definitely, of course, will decrease your risk of this happening. So it's not something everyone's getting it, but what can you do about it? Number one, do your best with general hygiene. Number two, make sure you're taking care of your general health. If you have diabetes, take care of that. See a doctor, be healthy. And then number three, sometimes when people get it and then they don't know they have it, especially for guys, it's not anything they're thinking about. So just knowing that, if things are looking red and painful, then maybe extra thin and kind of shiny, and just or something seems to be going wrong and burning when you urinate, take yourself to a doctor, try to figure out whether or not it's an STD, which is different, or if it's, a yeast infection, essentially Balanitis. And your doctor will help you think through that and then treat you. And then sometimes something important to do is sometimes a guy and a girl partner might have it and kind of just be recycling it and not realizing it.
So is this something that's transmittable or like?
It's not. We don't consider it an STD, but yes, it can be transmitted, but it's not the classic STD.
Another thing to look out for.
2020.
I wasn't ready.
So what normally happens in that situation is that rather than just reinfecting, it's reasonable for the partner to also get tested, and then them both to get treated at the same time, and then you're good to go going forward.
Okay,
we're covering it all tonight.
This is actually a good segue for the next question as well. So for some men, the subject of sex is still taboo. Men are currently have more partners than women normally do. What advice would you give young men who are ready to have sex, or safe sex in particular, and what, if any, health implications should they consider?
Yeah. So wait, can I just jump in there? What age should we start having the talk?
Yeah.
So I have a godson, still in diapers.
It's a hard one. The reason why I gave that little sigh is that I have little ones now, and I tried to give the talk, and it's really hard because my little ones are little, but you got to do it. And I think really you should. The first thing I would say is that the talk does not have to be the same talk. This is obvious at all the ages, and so it's like with any concept, you just have to break it down to where they are, and you might know your kid is advanced or not advanced, and their environment. So whether or not you're talking about literally, penetration and protection and call me if, and don't you ever X, or if you're just talking about the fact that men and the women get together, and the cells from the man goes to the woman, whatever level of the conversation it is, it's important to have it.
So there's no baby shark in your house. There's no babies appearing from the bird, the shark.
Yeah. I will confess my very first, because there's no one sits you down. I never had the talk as a kid. you just figured it out on your own. So I will confess, my very first attempt at the talk, it sounded like I was talking about the virgin birth. Like just like the baby appears in the woman and it comes out. Like, I didn't kind of get any details of how it got there. They're like, wait, how did this thing get in baby in the mom in the first place? So, but I think it's just one of those things, like parents, when you guys get to that point, you'll see some things you just have to like just force yourself to do, but because it's important. And so you just have to find a language that works for you and your kid and make sure they're informed, because unfortunately, as I did when I was growing up, you just learn it on your own otherwise. And it's better you have a clue in from your parents who will show you how to do it the right way. So pediatricians are great at it. I'm not a pediatrician. I deal with adults all day long. So I had to learn the hard way about how to have to talk with my kids.
Yeah, it was something I actually got. I remember my not younger sister, but I was younger, and my older sister, she maybe like 3-4 years older than me, told me like, yeah, birds drop babies off in the chimney. That's how it happened. And I remember being in like 4th or 5th grade, and that was still something that kind of stuck with me, right? Never really asked. My mom never really had the conversation with me. And that's when I really got the full understanding of how things happen, right? And I think I might have been really late in the game, right? I'm not sure, right, relative to some of my other friends at the time was like, oh wow, this is how it really happened. That was like 4th grade in health class when I really kind of started to learn about the reproductive system.
Yeah. So, but what I would say just quickly is that there is a trend, and you guys have probably heard this already, that people are tending to having less sex than ever before. Like, these pendulums swing one versus the other. But if you look at over the past decade or two, the frequency of people having sex at a given time is like going down. So for instance, if you think of people in the 18 to like 24 segment, it's gone from like being, like sexual abstinence has gone from like being 20% up to 30%. Oh, wow. And that trend is the same, even for 35 to 45. And then once you hit over that point, then it hasn't really changed much. But that teens, 20s, 30s, they're all having less sex than they did, 20, 30 years ago, which is interesting.
And you think that has something to do with like maybe generational pressures or society kind of promoting or not promoting sex as much?
Yeah, I think these things tend to be cyclical, and I think there is an aspect of the poor millennials. We get on them so much. I personally think part of
pause. Good.
Be careful what you say.
No, I get it. I think really at the end of the day, no, I actually think it's a bit in a positive sense. I think millennials are more like socially conscious or more aware, or more, whatever word you want to put to it. Like they care more about these things. And I think that, whereas back 20 years ago, it was more, hey, body count, the higher, the better. I think there's been a pendulum swing the other way where it's like, hey, we're trying to celebrate women more, trying to get rid of misogyny, trying not to be, so phobic in many ways. And so trying to address the presence of toxic masculinity. And we see it not just amongst, millennials, but in all fields too, like there are things that politicians could get away with, for example, or stars could get away with 20 years ago. They're not going to get away with it today. I think there's that similar consciousness, which is good, just as a human being. What should we be doing on an emotional level that might be even separate from what we can do on a physical level?
Mm-hmm. You dropped some gems there. I didn't know people were having less sex, but I guess this isn't a conversation I have with my friends often. So,
well, especially 2020. I mean, COVID really put it on a shutdown. You can't even cough. Cough is the new STD.
Yeah, I tease, and I always tell people on the weekend, what am I doing? I'm dotting and bopping. But I was like, my cough has put all of my dotting and bopping. Like, I can't go to brunch. I can't go anywhere. Nobody wants to be around the person with the cough. It's just allergies, I promise. So I guess with that, the next question we have is, if there's a couple preparing to start a family, um, what should a man do to start preparing, like physically and from a health standpoint? So I often joke with some of my friends who decide to start having children later in life, because I'm like, I don't know how you are like 45, like waking up at 2 in the morning to like change diapers, you crawl on the floor. Like I'm struggling to get down there right now, and I'm not there yet. So we know that women do all of the hard work there, but what can a man do to start preparing?
Yeah, no, so women definitely have to start thinking about things that they're leaving out of their diet and exposing themselves to. And the interesting thing is that the same applies to the guys too. Like one classic thing is you just need to get a lot of toxins and exposures out of your body. Like one of them is smoking. Smoking actually can have like a bad effect on infertility. So, that's not good for your body and the quality of your sperm, so to speak. So cutting that out is something you should do. For people who drink too much, just to put it that simply, that's something else that could affect the quality and quantity of sperm. So you kind of want to cut it back. And so, it's not just women who need to cut some of this stuff out. The guys have to do it too. Drugs can do it as well. So I'd say avoiding all those negative exposures is one thing. And then the second thing is just taking care of your body is another big component. So especially if you're working against diabetes, if you're working against obesity, kidney disease, just making sure that you're getting the care you need with your doctor to bring everything into alignment, to get your goal blood sugar levels, your goal BMI, your goal blood pressure levels. The more you do that, the healthier you are, and that kind of transfers to your kind of, to use a strange term, your semen quality, the number and the quality of sperm that you want to pass on to your kids. And so the other thing I think, just to kind of double back to the mental health issue, is, we need to also kind of pay attention to that aspect of things too. I think oftentimes as a culture, when there is violence against women, we usually start with the woman, what were you wearing? Where'd you go? Even if it's in a protective sense, it's still, hey, don't you know you're at risk? So I think we should have a culture of calling out men and speaking to men in these situations too. So I would also add to that list, hey, if you know you have a tendency towards violence, or you have anger issues, management issues, seek help. So guys have something they can do too. So don't wait until you're in a situation and there's a baby crying, or mom is like recovering from a C-section to like start being violent. Seek help now before the baby gets there. Call your doctor. There's a lot of professional help you can get to help manage your anger issues, and just create a better, more supportive, healthy environment for everyone in the house, especially mom who's doing all the work.
That's good info, and I guess also good segue to the next question. So there isn't really a age cap, or so I've been told, for men to start having families. But as men get older, what are some things that they should consider, and what is like the optimum age for men to really start families? It's more because I'm not having any kids.
Well, I mean, the interesting thing is that, it's not the 1930s, 1950s anymore. And even if you think about, age 27 for a man, like an average age for a man to have a kid, that was the average age back in the 70s. So for right now, the average age for a birth is in the 30s, early 30s. Yeah. And so, it's not as, and it's because of the reasons we know, people are more likely to go to college now than they did, decades ago. Master's programs, get a, whatever, there's a lot going on. So people tend to, not just the women, but the guys too, are putting aside, having kids till later on. And it's not uncommon. If you look at, all the births that occur, about 10%, up to 10% are happening for guys who are 40 years old or older. And exactly. And then for age 50, then that's like 1 in 100. So that's pretty rare. But 40s, that's 1 in 10. And so the old dad,
40 is going to be like the new age people are having children.
Yeah, I mean, it's a reality. And even for me myself, with all the training, I mean, you can't, all that training you got to do, so, got to go to class. So like for me, I think I think I got it done by late 30s, but yeah, mid 30s to late 30s for me was when I was having my kids. So it's a very common thing. It has its negatives. So the negative is that, the younger you are, probably the healthier your sperm are, so to speak, and the less likely you are to have infertility. I think once you hit age 35, the risk of, there's a slight increase in risk of birth defects and premature births and things like that. And then once you hit 40s and then 50s, for sure, that risk goes up.
For men and women, because I've always been told like that was for women. Like that.
I know, but that's just because we live in such a misogynistic culture that wants to blame women for everything. So really, yes. So we tend to think about women, and yes, 35 is a number you tend to hear more for women, but interesting enough, same thing applies for guys too. For sure. Yeah. Risk of autism, male, paternal age is definitely part of it. And you could say, well, why is that the case? Well, it's just that the longer we exist on this earth, the cells in our body have this information kind of package with DNA. And with every additional year, there are little mistakes that are made in the writing of these DNAs that are passed on from year to year. So by the time, if you're waiting to your 40s and 50s, you're just more likely to have accumulated a couple of mistakes in the recopying of your DNA, and you can pass some of those on. So, but again, situations are very different, couple by couple basis. See your doctor, see what's going on. If you've been trying for a year, that's the count at which we call it infertility, a year of trying and not being able to have a kid. And sometimes it's mom, dad, or both, and they can help dig through the weeds to figure out exactly what the issue is. But yeah, theoretically, it could definitely be dad that's causing it, not just mom.
I definitely have to check my mom that like, oh, women, like you got to have that baby before 35, or else your chances of having a kid with special needs greatly increases. For men, they've always like, oh, guys can have kids all the way up into their 50s, but that's really good information.
Yeah, but facts are a sticky and a hard thing to shake. Yeah, that guys are involved too, for sure. But this is not to say, again, this is not to put a downside, and we see it all the time. Like I said, I had kids relatively late, in my late 30s, and so it's all the time. It's very common, and there are a lot of positives for being an older dad too. Usually, you're a little bit more stable, you're a little bit more appreciative, and you're less frazzled. You're a little bit more further along in your economic journey. All other things being equal, and so it's the plus. It's like real life. It's plus the negatives, and either way, it's hard work. It's the hardest thing, no matter when you do it. But it's most rewarding thing also at the same time.
Okay. So speaking of maturing and getting as we get older, I know women at a certain age typically go through menopause. Does that happen for men? So is there a change in hormonal balance when men get of a certain age? Can you speak to that?
Yeah. So I know, women, they do so much. They have periods and they get pregnant and they go through menopause. And I know they're all listening right now, just hoping I'm going to say that there is male menopause that hits men too. I really wish I could, ladies. But the fact of the matter is there isn't, at least not the way that we kind of like think about it with women. So with women, and we're not going too much into that, but there's just this more drastic drop in hormones produced because the cycling is stopped. For men, there isn't that same exact change in our physiology, what's going on in our body. So there isn't any kind of reason for there to be that sudden drop. But there is a sort of slow, a slow process that's somewhat similar. And we just call it age-related low testosterone. And so starting from around age 40, and I say this as someone who's over 40 myself, so but starting from around age 40, there is a drop exactly in your testosterone levels for about 1% every year. There's a drop. And it's enough that a number of men, by the time they're older men, will have low testosterone, but still majority, like 85% of old men still have what's considered a normal level of testosterone, but about 15% as older men, 60s or so, will at that point formally be able to meet criteria for having low testosterone. And so with that, some of the biggest, most classic changes would be a drop in your libido, not the same drive. And then along with it, some other things, a drop in aggression, a drop in concentration sometimes. And sometimes it can also come with even things like, kind of like chest discomfort, because people can have what we call gynecomastia, where like they almost have like developing small breasts, so to speak. And you've seen images of this, where men can almost look like they're having breasts. And so there can be these subtle changes that can occur in both sexual aspect of people's lives, in terms of their kind of like almost like a psychological or concentration standpoint. And then just some vague, sometimes people could just have fatigue or somnolence, kind of feel sleepy or tired. And there are many things that can cause it. There are many things that can cause it, but low testosterone is one of those things.
Is there any?
I guess the solution for something like that. So, as someone is aging, we know that this is like a natural bodily function. Would you prescribe them like testosterone treatments, or
is there anything we can eat? Is there certain physical activity we can do to keep the levels up?
We don't want any of what you would.
They're like, just tell me, is there a tree in Africa
Where
I will go to? So I will make the pilgrimage. So the short answer again is a reminder that this does not apply to most men. Again, by far the great majority of men will not have this issue. When it comes to supplementation, there is a little bit of, there isn't a consensus. There are some groups that say, hey, let's only treat it if a person is having sexual dysfunction and they're aware of the risk and benefit of being on testosterone. There are some groups like Endocrine Society says, hey, no, if someone has, any kind of symptom, whether it's sexual or not, and they want treatment, it's okay to go ahead and treat. The problem is that there are risks with supplementation. Every medication has its downside. And so it can slightly increase risks of things like breast cancer, which can happen rarely in men, or prostate cancer, or even issues of things like strokes, heart attacks, blood clots. And so, again, not that this is a common side effect, but it's a possible side effect. So any medication has to be done in conjunction with your physician. And so this is one of them. Conversation, what are you trying to achieve? And if it's a go for some people, it's definitely worth doing it, and it helps a lot. Yeah, a lot of people are on testosterone replacement and do very well on it. I had to give the fine print because I'm a doctor. That's what we do, but it ends up being relatively rare, and people in general do great with it. Have a conversation with your doctor, and obviously they'll be able to think through it with you.
So there's no root, but we do have a shady comment from, I'm assuming, a female viewer out there, who said that there may not be a medical male menopause, but we should vet the mental menopause doc. So I think I know what they're referring to. My mom has complained about it. I think aunts and aunties. Is there anything that happens like mentally when men, become a certain age and they go get that red Corvette and they're chasing, fast cars and young women?
Oh, so that's what you mean. Okay. So I wasn't sure if you were referring almost to like dementia, mentally. You mean more like that middle age.
That middle age.
Okay.
When all of those marriages, those 20-year marriages, be like,
yeah.
Who are you?
Yeah, that's a tricky one. What I will say about that is that we can't blame it on menopause. I wish I think that would be a cop out to blame it on these are my biological needs. I think it's just wrong. There's no cop out for that one. But does it happen? It definitely does happen. There are definitely with even just for example, you know, when Cialis and the first one, I'm blanking on the name, the erectile dysfunction medication first came out. Viagra, of course. How could we forget Viagra? Yeah, when those first came out, they actually tracked an increase in infidelity in that age population, because all of a sudden, you know, grandpa wasn't acting like grandpa anymore. So it's so sometimes that steady decline in that 1% every year is for the good. I'll just leave it at that.
So on that note, extremely great conversation. I've learned a lot, and having to check some of my own biases. Thank you so much for your time, Doc. How can the people reach you? How can they follow and support you?
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate it. I've had a great time. You guys are excellent. Love what you guys are doing here. I go by the handle at Real Dr. Ugo. So that's REAL, doctor spelled out DOCTOR. And the last name, then the word is UGO. So Real Dr. Ugo, UGO at the end. Then you'll find me on Instagram mostly, also a little dabbling on Twitter. And join me. I have a weekly podcast where we talk about Think or Fact. We deal with health issues by dealing with it in a quiz format. And so I quiz the audience. They're very engaged. And by the end, I tell them the team audience score, and then we choose an MVP and give them a gift. And so we have a good time. Find me on Instagram, Real Dr. Ugo. Love to see you guys. And tell me that you heard me here on this podcast. So that'll make it even extra special.
That sounds really great. Thanks again. So I'm asking all of our viewers to please join us next time on Thursday, November 19th at 7 p.m., where we'll be joined by Joshua Xavier. He's a certified health and wellness coach to discuss Get Whipped into Shape, Fitness Counts. So next time, this has been the YBC Remote Talk. Thank you all.